and thank you for joining us today for this important media briefing convened by the Minister of Electricity and Energy, Dr. Kgosientsho Ramokgopa, to announce key interventions to end load reduction in line with his endeavor and commitment of ensuring reliable electricity supply for all. My name is Zakane Kambane from the Ministry of Electricity and Energy, and joining the Minister today, to his left, is Ms. Agnes Mlambo. She is the acting General Manager, or rather Group Executive for Distribution at Eskom. And then to her left is Mr. Colin Reddy, who is the General Manager reporting under her. Without further ado, I'd like to invite the Minister to the podium to kick us off with today's briefing, after which we will then take questions from members of the media in the room and those who are following this briefing virtually. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tsakani, and good day to everyone. Just to once more thank the members of the media for having taken time to transmit this information to the multitudes across the length and breadth of the country, and also to thank Agnes and the team for the wonderful work that they are doing to ensure that we are able to achieve our plan of eliminating load reduction. So I want to start here. I did make the point previously that we are going to ensure that we address the multiple manifestations of the energy deficit, the electricity deficit in the country. The preeminent one was on the aggregate side, when we failed to aggregate generation, could not meet the aggregate demand, resulting in bouts of load shedding. And as we have reported previously, is that we have turned the corner. We are not about to turn the corner, we have turned the corner on the resolution of load shedding, and I said to the country that I'll be the first one to stand before the nation and state boldly that we have ended load shedding. And that before that time comes, I want to say that we are doing everything possible to eliminate it. So we can see that we are achieving exceptional results at the height of load shedding in 2023 early, around February, March. We had the energy availability factor, that is the performance of the generation fleet, was sitting at about 48%. And now as I speak to you, we're consistently above 70%. And I'm confident that we'll continue to push that number up, and hence you see that the lights remain on. The second challenge that is confronting us is the one on the cost of electricity. I've stood here before the country and gave you the assurance that we're working on the resolution on the cost of electricity. From 2007 to 2024, last year, electricity has increased by 937%, compared to an inflation over the same period that has increased by about 155%. So you can see that it's eroding the disposable income of many households. It's not just affecting the poor, of course, it's affecting the poor disproportionately, but the middle class, even the high income earners, are finding it exceptionally difficult to afford the cost of electricity. And of course, it manifests itself in the South African economy, making our goods not competitive on the market. So we are doing everything to resolve that. I give you this assurance that we're going to resolve that. I'll come back to you. And then the third manifestation of the electricity deficit was in relation to load reduction. I did explain previously that load reduction is a downstream isolated infrastructure deficits that relates to both the reticulation and the distribution infrastructure, resulting in a localized community not having access to electricity during peak periods. Those peak periods in the morning and in the afternoon. And I'd made the point that it is immaterial to these communities, whether you call it load reduction or you call it load shedding, what is common is that there are periods in the day where they don't have electricity. But also what is more worrying about load reduction, it's got an appearance of discrimination on an income basis. So essentially you will see when I map the prevalence of load reduction in the country, the density or the concentration of load reduction is in poor areas. And it gives an impression that we are penalizing the poor, those who can afford, and of course those who are affluent, the rich, who have a voice, are let scot-free. And it's something that we are soiling our message in relation to the efforts we are making to ensure that we are able to provide electricity to everyone on a continuous, uninterrupted basis, 24/7, 365 days a year. So now today I'm announcing we are ending load reduction. So I repeat, we are ending load reduction. The period we have set ourselves is anything between 12 to 18 months, but it can be exceptionally shorter than that. And I'll explain to you why that 18 months period, because it's a function of how we get to be received by communities. And I'll tell you how we're going to address that situation. So I want to say to the country, we will end load reduction if there's a absolute cooperation by communities. We'll end it in the next 12 months. And in areas where we experience resistance, we'll invest time and effort to engage with everyone. And in that instance, then we might push it further by another 6 months. But I want to say to the country that we are going to end load reduction in the next 12 months. Once we get that cooperation, there are parts of the country where we are confident we'll get that cooperation. There are parts of the country where we know it's going to be difficult. And I'll share with you what the features of the areas of difficulty, or if you like, intransigence. But I thought I must say the following, just to situate the conversation. There's 1.69 million customers. So I'm talking about customers. So if you had to translate this to number of people, assuming that an average size of a household is about 5 people. So you could be talking about, if you like, 8.5 million people that are affected by load reduction. So every day when they wake up, they don't have access to electricity. When they come back from work in the evening, there's about 3 to 4 hours where they don't have access to electricity. It's a major disruption to their lived experiences. And the total number of transformer failures is about 771. And I must say that a large part of this has to do with illegal connections. And that's why I'm saying that as part of this effort, we are going to regularize people. So we are going to go into an area, typically an informal area, assuming that the municipality has formalized that. We will roll out the infrastructure so that everyone has got access to electricity that is legally procured. So part of the resistance I was referring to, we know that there are those who are profiting from this illegal connection. So some of them are delinquent employees of ESCOM and municipalities that are connecting people illegally, and we know they are going to agitate those communities to resist our presence there, because we are taking an illegally earned income that they've accumulated over time at the detriment of the users, the consumers in the area. What is the impact of this? And then there's issues of vandalism. So part of the effort that we'll be making is to refurbish and maintain the distribution and reticulation infrastructure. So we're going to roll it out ourselves to ensure that we're able to address this situation. And we know that once you resolve the issues of illegal connections and ensure that those who can afford to pay will be able to pay, and those that are indigent, that qualify for free basic electricity, do get that electricity, we are going to ensure that the ESCOM is able to recoup its income, and municipalities are able to recoup their income. And maybe the qualification I need to make, the 1.69 million customers are the ones on the ESCOM database. I'm working with municipalities to determine what are those that are subjected to load reduction, that are supplied to by municipalities. And that number will come, and then I'll update the presentation here. But the timeline still remains the same. The aggressive nature of the rollout will still remain the same. So we know that this has got both the social, economic, and financial and safety risks. Safety risk is that when there are illegal connections, you have wires that are exposed. We know of instances where kids have been electrocuted as a result of wires that are being exposed when people connect illegally. It's got social manifestations in that kids preparing for exams, they want to write homeworks, they come back home, there is no electricity. When in fact those who are in areas where they are affluent, they can go onto online, do their research, the lights are on, they can do their own homework, they study better under relatively better circumstances, and that has got an impact on the prospects of their academic progress. So those are the social manifestations I'm talking about. It's got economic manifestations because there are small businesses in townships, in informal areas that rely on the availability of uninterrupted electricity. When in the morning they want to prepare magwenya, as an example, as a business, the lights are off. And then also in the evening, the lights are off. So it just constrains the ability of township businesses to thrive, this issue of load reduction. So we want to end it once and for all. One of the issues that we will be doing, so the first thing is the rollout of smart meters. So I want to make sure that everyone, when you go into a community, is on a smart meter platform. One of the biggest criticisms I get, and these are valid criticisms, when I go into a community, they tell me that, Minister Ramokgopa, I pay for my electricity, I've not illegally connected, I'm consuming that which is allocated to me, and yet I'm subjected to a load reduction. And I know it is the neighbors or an adjacent settlement that is connecting illegally. Why is it that you are also punishing me? So with the rollout of smart meters, what that allows us to do is that if there are those who continue to be delinquent, by delinquency in this instance, I mean those that have the means, can afford, and they choose not to pay, we are able to isolate that customer alone and not make the rest of the customers who are connected to the same transformer collateral damage. So it gives us a technical agility for us to be able to roll out, to be able to isolate those who choose not to pay. The second thing about the smart meters is the following, is that there's about 2.1 million customers on the ESCOM side that qualified for free basic electricity. But of these 2.1 million customers, only 485,000 are getting this free basic electricity. And yet, National Treasury is given to allocating this to municipality, to ESCOM, to be able to ensure that the poor get free access to free basic electricity. Once we have rolled out smart meters, what that allows us to do, we'll be able to front load that allocation for free basic electricity for a household that qualifies to get that free basic electricity. So we're taking the money to the people, to the customer, where it belongs. That's what we are going to do. For that to succeed, we need municipalities to work with us to generate a robust and credible indigent register. So there's a framework against which we are able to evaluate someone's eligibility for free basic services. That's not done by ESCOM, it is done at the municipal level. So we need to work with municipalities, and in some instances, municipalities don't have that capability. It's something that we are going to build over time. But for us to end load reduction, you don't necessarily have to have the indigent register in place. You need the indigent register to be in place for us to be able to extend the free basic service going to those that they are affected by this. And as a result of this rollout, we'll be able to achieve universal access. So when we say load shedding is behind us, we mean that there should not be load reduction, and we're not going to discriminate anyone. And then one of the things that we're doing as a department is to review the free basic electricity framework. Of course, as we know now, the law says we have committed policy 50 kilowatt hour per month. We have done our own studies. And those studies are born out of evidence. ESCOM is the biggest utility, and of course municipalities 45%, they account for 45% of reticulation. We know that an average low-income household consume about 200 kilowatt hour of electricity per month. So if we talk about 100% subsidization of the poor, it means that 50 kilowatt hour should be at 200. But for you to shift it at 200, money must come from somewhere. So we're going to change this framework without necessarily relying on the fiscal envelope. So we don't want to go to Minister Godongwana to help us with additional money to have an additional 150 kilowatt hour given to the poor. We think that there are technology advances that can help us to do that. The microgrids, both solar PV and battery, or a combination of that can help us to bring down this cost of electricity, and therefore, by definition, we'll be able to give more to those who qualify. We'll come back with regards to the revision of that and how we are going to finance it. But the point I'm making is that we know that an average low-income household consume far more than the 50 kilowatt hour they consume now, about 200 kilowatt hour, because really society has evolved. You'll find even in low-income households, they've got cell phones, they are going to charge these cell phones, it consumes electricity. When we conceived of this 50 kilowatt hour, this policy, you never had the penetration of cell phones as we have them today. Low-income households, in some instances, like here in Gauteng, very progressive policies, they have gadgets that they can take home to study. They need to connect those, and that's why you see the levels of consumption have gone up. Even a low-income household have got a TV installed. When these things were conceived, you never had these things in place as a result of some degree of social and economic progression. And that's why that revision is important, and that's why we have to answer the question how it will be financed. And we think that we will not tamper with the resource envelope. Our view is that we will not go for more money because the state can't afford it. The answer is in new technologies. And then the other point I want to make is that when I have conversations with, sometimes I do media interviews and the like, and of course other voices in the space, they say, no, this load reduction comes about because Eskom is not truthful. It's having problems with regards to generation, and therefore they are penalizing the poor so that they can bring down demand. I thought that I must just share with you that, if you look at a demand on a day like this, about peak demand will be about 26,000 megawatts. We are generating substantially more than that. And as a result of load reduction, the amount of unsaved energy is 529 megawatts. So there is no relationship between our generation capacity and load reduction. We can be able to provide for everyone. So the issue is not that. The issue is because of a constrained environment. And then there are 3 provinces in the country that accounts for over close to 80% of load reduction. 21% of let me start this way, 38% of the total amount of load reduction in this country is in Gauteng. And this is found in the informal settlement. As a result of growth, proliferation, informality, and the inability of municipality to keep up with the demand for electricity infrastructure expansion, you find that there's increased illegal connection. And like I said, the informal settlements. And then what do Eskom and the municipalities do? To protect that infrastructure, they initiate the load reduction. So if you like, the center of gravity of this load reduction is in Gauteng, then followed by Limpopo. So we've seen that there are villages after village in Limpopo where there's load reduction. And I'll show you the numbers, where these towns are, where these municipalities are, and then we've gone down to the level of a ward. And I'll tell you when are we going to start, when do we expect to end. Of course, I do qualify that, is that going into that space is a function of how you are received by communities. We know, for an example, that highly likely, when we go to the more rural areas, the level of cohesion and discipline is relatively higher than the township. What do I mean by that? The entry point in the rural villages, we go through the chiefs. And then there's an orderly way in which we engage with communities. When you come to the more urban, peri-urban settlements, informality, you've got voices that are profiting out of illegal connection. And they are the ones who are likely going to stop us from engaging communities so that we are able to roll out this infrastructure. So we're expecting the greatest resistance in the more urban areas and a relatively free access in the more rural areas. And I want to emphasize to communities, when you come into your community, we have communicated with you through the Ward Council. We are coming on this day, we are going to map out the infrastructure rollout. When are we starting, when are we ending, so that we have electricity. If there's resistance after multiple engagement, we retreat from that area, we go to the next suburb. And then you'll join the queue from the back. So that's the point that we'll be registering to communities. Of course, when we engage, it's a dynamic nature of engagement. Areas of disagreements, will resolve them in a respectful manner, engaging manner, and then where we are received, and there are communities that are calling ESCOM and the minister to say we are ready, we'll go into that space and address that. We will not place that requirement of pay so much before we come in. There was a 500 rands requirement. We'll just go into an area and we address load reduction once and for all. And we hope that communities will receive us. The next province that is most affected is in Mpumalanga. When I engage with the mayors there, I can see the level of proliferation of load reduction. And then the last one of the four is KZN. It's sitting at 18% of the total load reduction is located in KZN. And the rest really are in the context of the totality of load reduction is not that significant, the remainder of the provinces. So our ambition is that those provinces outside Gauteng, Limpopo, Mpumalanga, and KZN, we are confident that in the next 8 to 12 months would have eliminated load reduction, because in both absolute number and percentage wise, they are not as main. So we are going to attack those. I'm talking the Free State, the Northwest, Eastern Cape, Western Cape, and Northern Cape. We are confident we'll address those because they account for less than 2% individually. So that's the point that we are making. And then we make the point that there's a three-pronged approach to the elimination of this. So I said the more pessimistic time period is 18 months, and we can do it much, much less. And our computation is that we can be able to do that in 12 months, eliminate load reduction once and for all, and give dignity to our people, including those who are in villages, far-flung areas, and those who are in informal settlement. I've made the point that we are addressing the issue of free basic electricity, what that quantum is, how it will look like. And then the second thing is to ensure that there has to be the rollout of smart meters. So what we have, one of the conditions to help us to accelerate this process is for us to be able to work with the domestic industry, those who are in the business of manufacturing of smart meters. For them to make these smart meters, of course, meeting our own standards. There are checks and balances, technical checks and balances that ESCOM will do. They already have about 600,000 with them. Now, as I speak to you, we'll start with those and then canvas industry to get more. So we think what this exercise will also do is to increase capacity utilization of the smart meter manufacturers in the country. And then the other thing that we're doing is a deployment of distributed electricity infrastructure. We will be taking you to Musina, where we went into a village that was never connected to electricity. That village now, as I speak to you, when we take you there, you'll get your own testimonials. You don't have to ask me. We have gone into that area, installed solar and battery for purposes of storage. We're electrifying everyone. And we go further, and for public spaces, they get free Wi-Fi, and then we also have an ambition of ensuring that everyone has got access to Wi-Fi. What that will do is a pilot phase. We think that we can peg electricity at a particular level. I will not share with you what that level is. We already have a number, so we'll use that site to justify, because science is important. What is this threshold? below which we can afford to provide this. And I can tell you now, it's substantially less than what they are currently paying. And it is that model. You remember earlier on when I say we are going to revise the free basic electricity. When we do the hybrid of solar and wind, we think we can provide electricity far, far much cheaper than is currently the case. We are confident about that. And we are just going to show where in relation to the two villages in Musina, and we will invite you to come and see it. So the rollout of distribution infrastructure, reticulated or localized generation, a distributed generation is a more opposite technical language. It's going to help us to connect people faster, and by faster I mean the following. Now, for us to connect a far remote village in Ramokgopa, we must build a transmission infrastructure. It is costly and it takes time, because in some instances, for you to put up the pylons, you go through a privately owned property. The farmer will insist that you are going to pay me this much. We think that we must pay you substantially less. We enter into discussions. There's an impasse. Then you go through process of expropriation. By that time, you find each other is 3 years later. But with distributed generation, we don't have to connect to the grid. We're going to generate closer to where the load is, where the source is. And in that way, we're able to do it faster. That's the point that we are making on this slide. What is this thing in numbers? Remember, I told you I'm going to pick on Gauteng. In Gauteng, there's 632,158 customers that are being load reduced. And of course, the feeders that support this 632,000 plus is about 604. And our projection is that by March of next year, we should have done 145. Like I said, it's a conservative number. If we get to be received by communities, we can do it faster. The nice thing about Gauteng is the density, is that everyone is located almost in one area in their numbers. So you don't have to have trucks all over the townships, so we can move from one block to the other, one house to the other, rolling out smart meter. But like I said, that's where we anticipate to find the most resistance. And that's why that number you'll see, we say in the next 8 months, we should be at 145. If you don't find that resistance, you could be double that number at about 300 or so. And that's a function of our engagement with those communities, because there's no substitute for engagement. Because communities have got their own agency, we need to engage with them. And our passage access to these communities is through the ward councillors. I've made the point, for an example, about Limpopo, 349, 127 of these 349,370 are affected, 78 feeders. And then we do make the point that in March of 26 next year, we would have halved this number. I'm confident with Limpopo that this is a conservative number. We can do substantially more than that. So that's why we do that for each and every province, and that's why we are showing. So the point I'm making is that there is science. We are very granular as engineers to know the number of customers, to know the number of meters by definition, and the resource requirements for us to be able to roll out this infrastructure. Remember, once we are able to capture this and roll out these smart meters, we are able to bring down the amount of debt. And I'm sure one of the logical questions to ask, how are you going to finance it? We'll find it from the ESCOM balance sheet, dedicate the resources there. But there's also a cost of not doing this. The cost of not doing this, that money that is owed to ESCOM collectively by municipalities and customers is over 100 billion, is going to grow. And I did share with you that it's growing by about 2 billion rands per month. So it's in our interest to stem the leakage, and that's what we have set for ourselves. So I do make the point. The first phase, we want to resolve about 291 feeders in all of those the provinces, and we are going to bring down these numbers. We are confident that the first phase, which will end by March 26, the other 5 provinces outside Gauteng, Limpopo, KZN, and Mpumalanga would have resolved the issues of load reduction. So we're confident we'd have done it, or significantly far. And then depending on the level of resistance, we should have eliminated the load reduction across the length and breadth of the country by March 2027. But our view is that we are confident we can do it much, much earlier. Like I said, it's a function of a community cooperation, and of course we'll invest a lot of resources in that engagement. So we map March 2026, and then that's the first phase from today to March 2026, and then the second phase is from March 2026 to September 2026, the third phase September 2026 to March 2027. Like I said, those numbers, those timelines can come back and allow us an opportunity to ensure that everyone is able to benefit from the democratic dividends of having access to electricity. I'm going to give you two typical examples of the levels of granularity. I've chosen KZN as a first example. So we know that in the municipality of Nongoma, in Ward number 7 and Ward number 8, accounting for 1,293 prepaid users, these users are subjected to load reduction. So we have gone to the level of the ward, of how, and then we know the number of customers. And we say we are going to start now in October 2025. By March 2026, we would have finished the Nongoma Ward number 7 and 8 load reduction there. And you can see that there's municipalities that are highly affected. Mbonambi and Msinga, they are the most highly affected by both the number of wards and also the number of customers. So now we know the science of going into an area that if we are to isolate Mbonambi and Msinga, and it's where you're starting, people are going to see the biggest difference. So if you are to go in the evenings and the mornings in those wards in Msinga and Mbonambi local municipalities, you'll see it's dark. They've got a different relationship to electricity than the rest of the country. So once we move in our numbers, we're going to leave the place lit and would have addressed the situation. The other example I am giving you is Limpopo. Remember, we're doing this for each and every province, and then we go to a municipality, and then we go to a ward, and then we go to the number of customers, and then we tell you when are we going to start. Limpopo, let me give you an example. Go to Tzaneen. It's very dark in the morning, it's very dark in the evening, because of the number of wards that are affected by load reduction. And we are saying Tzaneen, we are taking it now in October. And we are confident we would have ended load reduction in Tzaneen by March of 2026. Again, like I said, is a function of that cooperation that I was speaking to. You can see the number of wards that are affected there in Tzaneen. It's almost all the municipalities in Tzaneen, the Greater Letaba, Greater Tzaneen, are affected by load reduction. So these areas, if I were to hold a meeting tomorrow and tell them that we're making significant strides in ending load shedding, they say, no, but Ramokgopa, you're talking a different language. Come here in the morning, in the evening. And that will not be a lie. They are in darkness in the morning and the evening, despite all the advances that we have made. So the point I'm making is that in the same manner that we orchestrated and delivered on load shedding, we are now resolving load reduction. I have confidence that we have set up 18 months, we'll do it substantially less period. And then I make the promise to the country again. I said to the country, we'll resolve the cost of electricity. I'll come back to you and show you how we're going to resolve it. We made a promise on load reduction, we are delivering. Load shedding, we have delivered. Load reduction, we will be delivering. Our actions and results will speak for us. We don't have to call a press conference to tell you that we are making strides. Go to Mbonambi, go to Msinga, go to Tzaneen early next year, and other municipalities that I have not mentioned. Ask them if they still have load reduction. They'll tell you that we don't know what you are talking about. Load reduction is done. And then we'll come to the cost of electricity. We are very methodical, we are very judicious, we are very calculated in the manner in which we're doing these things. I had said before, we can't do everything at a go. We are going to start somewhere. We started with load shedding. We are now on load reduction. We'll come back on reducing the cost of electricity. Thank you, TK.
Thank you very much, Minister, for these interventions and this media briefing. Colleagues, the Minister and his panel are keen and are prepared. They've got all the time to answer your questions for your clarity and further depth as we rely on yourselves, the Fourth Estate, to convey these key messages to communities, the public and society at large. So with a show of hands, colleagues, we'll start with questions in the room. And then if Vanessa and Batabile can also just be prepared to take us through the online questions. So there's Antoinette, there's, okay, you'll go second. Any other questions in the room? Okay, there's the third question from newsroom. We'll start with you, Antoinette.
Good afternoon, Antoinette Slavert. I'm a freelance journalist. I just want to check what is the estimated total cost of the project, and then what will Eskom be paying per meter, and also will you use the transversal contract of National Treasury or not, and if not, why not? Thank you.
Good afternoon, it's Diabo Seto from SABC News. Just two questions from me. The issue of the indigent electricity that's being applied for, Minister mentions that there's currently around 485,000 households, I understand, versus 2 million that has been targeted. What has been the trend, or what would you say is the reason that people are not applying for what they can or should be qualifying for? Given the state of the economy, we would appreciate that more households have more people not working and therefore maybe qualify for being indigent. And secondly, what happens if the household is already highly indebted? They have a debt already there. Are you going to write off the debt and proceed to put them on the indigent program? Or how exactly are you going to manage the fact that they had already consumed electricity and now are applying for indigent services? Thank you.
Sanbalan, Newsroom, Ngobile Madlala from Newsroom Africa. I just want to find out, the Minister spoke about the fact that when you're rolling out these smart meters, you're not going to do what you did previously where people have to sort of pay the debt, if I'm understanding correctly. You're just going to start by rolling out the infrastructure. I want to know what happens to those that may be currently paying or those that are approached or told that they need to pay.
Thanks. Are those all the questions in the room? Batabile, Vanessa, the online questions.
We have 5 questions from Terence Krima, representing Engineering News. First question, what other infrastructure is needed to end load reduction? What will this cost and how will it be funded? Second question, will a pilot site be selected for an initial rollout? What will it be broad-based implementation from day one? Third question, what is the specific community engagement strategy and who will lead it? Fourth question, what about dealing with illegal connection in areas not currently subjected to load reduction? And last question from Terence, what is your timeline for finalizing the new FBE framework? And will you have public consultation to assess different options, even options that might not involve FBE, such as direct grants?
Are those all the questions? Yes. Okay, we'll get responses. Okay, you can come to the podium.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the questions that have been raised. I will answer some of the questions, and then the Minister will then take on the rest of the questions. So the first question from you, Antoinette, is how much is it going to cost us and whether we're going to use the transversal contract. So currently, So number one, while the minister has given numbers for the load reduction, we are in the process of replacing all our old meters. And in total, we're looking at replacing about 6.2 million meters. We are still going through the investment process internally in Eskom, which will then be followed by a commercial tender process. So the question to answer on how much is it going to cost us will obviously be the outcome of that market scan through the tender process. The minister has, however, indicated that how quickly we're able to roll out will obviously be informed by the cost of those meters, including the infrastructure, the quality of the meters that are available in the market, as well as the availability in terms of the numbers. Again, that will be a process that we will determine when we do the commercial process. Will we use the transversal if it meets our requirements in terms of technical availability as well as the quality? We'll obviously then consider, and we are due to engage National Treasury, and we have been engaged in National Treasury as it is. On the credit process, the normal credit process on those that are owing us will apply. Again, we'll deal with each household based on its merit. We have a mix of issues. We've got people that can afford but decide to steal. We've got people that do not afford, and those are the functions and the issues that we're going to deal with as and when we roll out in those communities. And the minister spoke about the temper fines. Again, those are the issues that we'll deal with when we roll out and we engage the communities through the leadership. Again, the issues that we are dealing with on the ground are not going to be the same. On the funding of the illegal connections, between the INEP, which is the electrification funding, those are the kind of funds that we'll look into. Again, also the minister has indicated it will also depend if those communities are in the legal land or in the land that has been proclaimed by the municipalities. But those are the conversations and the processes that we'll be working very closely with the municipalities as we roll out and as we deal with the different areas. And of course, when we do the community engagement, the first thing is we're going to engage the leadership. The leadership will then guide us when we have to deal with the rest of the community. The minister indicated in the rural areas, it's very clear, it's simple. You deal with the chief. In the urban areas, we will deal with the mayors, the municipalities, and the ward councillors. But again, it will be determined by the issues and the challenges that we face in those environments. But the intent is that we will invest a lot of time in the engagement, educate the customers, because there's also a lot of incorrect information that is being given to the public about the smart meters. So we'll engage enough time for us to be able to guide and educate our communities. I think that covers most of the questions that have been asked. Thank you. Minister.
So maybe just to go back, Antoinette, on some of the sources of the funding, and it also applies to Kenneth. We had gone to Cabinet to rethink what you call the Integrated National Electrification Program, in short INEP, which is meant for universal access. We get an allocation of 4 billion rands per annum, so we'll take part of that to redirect it to support Eskom in this effort of rolling out. The second one is the point I made earlier on. What is the cost of not doing this? You know that the debt to Eskom will spiral. So that's the point I made to the Eskom board. It's an existential problem. Whatever the cost, of course, they will do the numbers after they go to market. I'm saying we're able to start tomorrow because they already have 600,000 meters. Am I right there, colleague? Yes. We already have those. So when they say they go to market, they mean in addition to those. And yes, Agnes is correct. The transversal contract, it must also be price competitive. So they are not obliged, but it's a procurement matter that the Agnes is more than competent and Colin and the team to deal with. And then Diabo, so there's 2.1 million customers that qualify for free basic electricity. But what we know is only 483,000 that are receiving that. So your question is what explains that? What explains that is the following, is that the municipalities don't have a robust indigent register. So there are other ways, scientific ways of determining that 2.1 million. So we know the number of the unemployed and all of that. You can triangulate the information, you arrive at 2.1. And then when you ask the real question, it's only 483. But what Treasury does, it religiously allocates this 2.1 million to municipalities. So what municipalities do, that although there's a Ramokgopa who is entitled to have this free basic electricity, and of course they've not designed the indigent register, they redirect that money to do other things, pay salaries and the like. So our view is that with a smart meter, you don't have to pay provide the free basic electricity through a municipality. There's a technology platform you have. At the beginning of the month, you just preload the smart meter. It's got a unique number, you preload it. And then that's how we're going to close that gap, Diabo, I think, going forward. And then I was talking about the temper meters, the temper fines. When you go to a community, ESCOM will say, I think 70% of the customers affected by load reduction, they must commit to paying 500 per month for the next 12 months, or a once of 6,000. As she says, it's a function of when we go. There are areas where they've already met that requirement. They are waiting for ESCOM to come in. And then there are areas where you can see, I mean, the poverty is palpable. And that's where you can then exercise those exemptions. So I was talking about the issues around the temper fines. And on the issues of illegal connections, I'm not sure if I made the point earlier on. It's important that the municipalities must have regularized that informal settlement. What do I mean by that? So we know that the informal settlements that have illegally occupied, privately owned land. So if ESCOM goes in there and provide electricity, the owner of the land, I think, will have a legal right to go after ESCOM. Because we have regularized these people and they are illegal. So that's working with municipalities, that will be very key, because we want the assurance that this has been formalized through a municipal process and then we are not exposed. And of course, the quest to address illegal connections in those areas will continue. ESCOM in its own areas would have seen on TV, and I guess municipalities. But for those that have been formalized and municipalities says, look, ESCOM, you can go in, we'll go in and address that situation. Of course, she has answered the community engagement. There's an established rule in the country. I mean, when you go into an area, there's a ward councillor. So the ward councillor and the ward committee will convene a meeting, and really they are the ones who will take ownership of driving the community reception for this. I mean, we don't have the capacity that is required for us to be omnipresent across the length and breadth of all of those wards. What we have is the arsenal of ward councillors and ward committees that will help us to land in those areas. And of course, there will be someone overseeing this. So what we are saying is that we are not replacing the institutional architecture of public engagement. We are working on the back, we are riding on the back of the existing protocols of how you engage communities. And then, Terence, on the free basic electricity, that framework is part of the totality of the electricity pricing policy. Yes, you are absolutely right. We're going to open this for engagement and conversation and whatever ideas are there. I mean, I've just listed one or two. I'm sure there are people with bright ideas that can come and say, look, this is how best we can do it. So that process will be opened up. We're committed initially that we want to conclude the issue of the cost of electricity, the electricity pricing policy by the first quarter of next year. And I had made that point because, first, I accept that it's urgent that we resolve it. But second, I accept that we have to open up the process for the many bright ideas that are there. And we need to give them sufficient time to engage. So we open that, and by the first quarter of next year, we'll be able to come back and address this situation. Yeah, I think that concludes. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister and Ms. Mlambo, for the responses. Colleagues, are there any further questions? This will be the last round of questions, so please feel free. There's Diabo. Any other questions in the room? Internet? And then Vanessa will check if there are questions online. So please go ahead.
Minister, this is slightly unrelated to this particular briefing, but still related to electricity nonetheless in a business context. This morning, the National Union of Metal Workers, NUMSA, they issued a statement saying that, acknowledging that you met with the ferrochrome industry, and they are pressed to know from you when you intend to give an electricity dispensation tariff to have Glencore and Samanco reopened. They seem to say in their statement that it's been very difficult for you to make this decision to prevent, to make sure that these two companies or entities are reopened. If you could perhaps give us an idea of what the difficulty is there or where you stand with that. Thank you.
Thank you. In addition to my colleague's question, NUMSA actually accused you, Minister, of delaying unnecessarily with the assistance to the smelters. They say Cabinet took a decision months ago and you are only acting on it now. If you could just give us a response to that. And then to come back to this program, please help me whether my interpretation is correct. It seems to me as if there are no real new policies at Eskom regarding tampering fines and fees for these new meters, and it seems as if this is really just putting together in a concerted effort different elements that have been in place. Do I interpret that correctly? Thank you.
Thanks, Antoinette. Vanessa?
Carol Payton at News 24 has 5 questions. What is the anticipated cost of replacing feeders in Eskom areas? What is the cost of the smart meters for Eskom areas? Does everyone get a smart meter or only load reduction areas? Please clarify, will Eskom foot the bill for all the feeder and the smart meters? In non-Eskom areas, will municipalities do the above? Last question from Carol Payton at News 24. Is it possible to say how much one smart meter costs at the moment? Questions from Menzingovo at Ikwekwezi FM in KZN. Can the minister say to municipalities that are what can the minister say to municipalities that are using load reduction as a means of saving money to pay electricity debt and other debts that have occurred all along the years? Will this have an issue? We have this issue in some KZN municipalities. Secondly, why is it when we buy a 100 Rand electricity coupon, we get 30 Rand of electricity? We have a follow-up from Terence Creamer. 2 questions from Terence Creamer at Engineering News. Is there any other infrastructure needed to end load reduction beyond smart meters? The last question, will a pilot site be selected for an initial rollout? That's all we have online.
Thank you for all the questions. I think, as it were, in our previous round, we'll start with Ms. Mlambo. Thanks.
Thanks again for the follow-up on the questions. On the policies, Antoinette, you're right. There's not really a change in the policies. Hence, I've indicated earlier on that as we roll out the smart meters, how we are going to deal with the customers will apply the normal credit management process, which will obviously then assess what would have been the issues with the illegal or tempered fine or whatever the case might be. The rollout is not only for the areas in the load reduction. We are, however, prioritizing those areas because, as the Minister has indicated, we want to make sure that now that we've dealt with load shedding, we are also aggressive, equally aggressive, in dealing with load reduction. And therefore, the areas that are covered by the municipalities will have to do their own rollout in terms of their smart meters or whichever strategy that they feel will be suitable and relevant in dealing with the load reduction in those municipal areas where they do have. Is it possible to know how much? I'm not, or maybe I am. I am intentionally not answering that question. Because one, we are going to go out in the market. If I give you a value, it means I'm giving an indication of our appetite of how much we are prepared to pay. That's the one reason. The second reason is that it's not just the meter. It is the infrastructure. It is the systems behind that meter that will allow the smart meter for us to be able to get the full functionality of that smart meter. So in one household, it might just be a change of the meter. In another household, it might be a change of the pole, change of the conductor. In other areas, it might even have to upgrade the whole infrastructure right up to the medium voltage lines. So again, it will depend on the challenges in that area. For illegal connections, obviously, it will be the same as electrification, which will be starting from scratch. Yeah, the question around how come when you buy 100 you get 30 rand tokens, yeah, that question is always difficult because we are saying you're paying 100 rand but you're getting 30 rand. We do try to explain this. Because the price of electricity year on year, it does increase. If you're paying 100 rand this year, you will not get the same number of tokens as you would get if you pay the same 100 rand the following year. So it is about the issue of the tokens. And on average, the price of electricity is about 2.10 rand. So if you are paying 100 rand, you should be able to get plus minus 50 kilowatt hour tokens. So it's not necessarily about the 100 rand and the 30 rand. I've covered the other issue of is there any other infrastructure? Yes, there is some other infrastructure that we'll need to put in, which will be part of the upgrade, so that we are able to get the maximum benefit of the smart meter infrastructure and be able to deal with the load reduction in the manner that we want to deal with it. Thanks, Minister. Do you want to? You can come in.
Thanks, Agnes. The issue about whether we're going to be running a pilot program in terms of rolling out the smart meters, we currently have already rolled out smart meters. So I think the Minister, in terms of the presentation, indicated that we are going to be rolling out the smart meters throughout the country. So there is going to be no need in terms of running a pilot project for the smart meters. We have a comprehensive plan and a schedule, and we have the technical specifications in terms of how to run or roll out the smart meters. So technically, we will be running it out throughout the country, so there is no need for a pilot itself. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Colin. That's a material point. So what we're doing now is to provide a much more coherent, ambitious implementation plan that is wall-to-wall in relation to ending load reduction. As Colin makes the point, they will be making interventions here and there. Now it's a comprehensive plan so that even if someone from village X doesn't see us, that person must know that we are coming on this day, so they are not forgotten that they exist and they are experiencing this challenge. We are going to cabinet now on how we want to help municipalities in relation to the value chain of electricity provision in the various municipalities, what we call the distribution agency agreement. ESCOM has already approved that through its governance structures. I'm confident it will be approved. As part of the totality of those interventions, we do see that even in the municipal provided electricity provided areas, we are going to make this intervention. So we'll account for it, and then the proceeds that come from the revenues collected will go to extinguish what would have been the upfront capital cost that the ESCOM would have incurred as a result of stabilizing the grid and rolling out the smart meters. So we want to ensure that there's a uniformity across the length and breadth of the country. On the FBE, I'm not sure if I understood that one, that was online. So yes, I did make the conceit that part of the problem with free basic electricity, that subsidies given to municipalities, municipality gets to redirect it to other pressures, spending pressures, but with the introduction of smart meters, we are able to target the consumer directly because these are intelligent meters and we should be able to front load it. And maybe to Siabo's question, so maybe will occasion a much more focused presentation or press briefing on the ferrochrome, but let me share with you the following. When the smelting industry came to me and raised the issues of electricity, I engaged with all the unions in that space. So Solidarity, NUMSA and NAM, I sat with them and said that, look, we have met with the industry and we appreciate that I think what they are placing before us places the economy in a very precarious situation. We need to make the intervention. And I said I'm going to Cabinet to seek that intervention because that intervention is over and above the framework approved by NERSA on the negotiated pricing agreement. So it needed significant concessions outside the parameters of the NPA. I went to Cabinet. Cabinet said, you understand the argument, proceed with the negotiations. I went back to all the players, the industry and also the unions, and said, I've gotten the approval. Now we, together with ESCOM, are engaging on what the issues are. So what are the issues that they required the length of time that we have taken? In the context of the decision, that's very quick. First is, what is the total additional megawatts? Okay, one of the things we place before the smelters is, one, we protect the jobs now. And then the second one is that we're going to come back with a package that we think will make a case for you to reopen the other smelter. So we needed to know what is the additional megawatt you'll need for you to reopen the other smelters. I got that number. And then ourselves and ESCOM needed to have the assurance that the system is performing at such level that we are able to keep to that promise of supplying those smelters. Because it can't be a 1-year decision, 2-year decision. It must be 5 years plus. I did say to you the system is performing exceptionally well and we have been able to sustain it. Remember, it's about the stability of the system. We have been able to sustain it. Last week, I went back to industry players and say we've gotten to a number, which will give it to them formally. So we'll write to them and give them that number formally. It's a significant number. Once they agree to that number, then we call the unions into one room. And I'll announce to the country. It's not a secretive arrangement. And I'll explain to the country how we arrived at that number. And of course, in the course of this, you must engage other industry players and explain to them why is it that you are not front of the queue. Because the next grievance I'm going to get, which is a natural one, it's for other industries, says no, but why the smelters, not us? We must be able to answer that. I didn't see the press release, but we have been talking to them. You can go back to them, say, Minister said he spoke to you before he went to Cabinet. Minister said he came to you after Cabinet. Minister promised you that once he finished with the industry, he'll come to you. We have kept to all of that. We are going to protect and save the South African economy. So it's an opposite question in the context of an economy that is not performing. What is helping us a big deal is the performance at ESCOM. So as I speak to you now, the level of performance is such that we are leaving megawatts on the floor. And those are the megawatts that we should be deploying in the South African economy to get it going. And what is important is that once it gets going, we must be able to sustain that. Otherwise, we don't want the factories closing again in the next 2 years or so because the system is not performing. And we are at a place where we are comfortable. And then there's another variable that we needed to resolve, which I'll make public when we announce, but we are on course. And then I do understand the impatience of the unions, because it's a section 189 of an intention to close. Yes, I do understand. We have spoken to them. It's unfortunate that they chose to do a press release, but they have a right to do that. But we communicate to them directly, and that you can put to them. they will tell you. I've been engaging with them collectively and individually as the unions in the sector. They have sight of what we've been doing. And of course, I think Solidarity and the others, they have an appreciation of what we are doing. We are moving in the right direction, I'm confident. But thank you very much for making time. Like I said, I think the next engagement will be on the ferrochrome stuff. And of course, next week when we announce the results of ESCOM, that I think will surprise many in a positive sense. But thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister, and your panel, Ms. Mlambo and Mr. Reddy. And colleagues, thank you very much once again for your attendance today. Your role in disseminating this information is very vital for our communities. And as the Minister mentioned, we are keen to invite you as we go to these communities. That invitation will come through the usual platforms, and it will come soon. So with that, colleagues, we've come to the end of today's media briefing. Thank you once again, and have a good afternoon further.